Welcome everybody to this ValuesJam, the guest session series. And Lisa and I are delighted today to have PJ with us and looking forward to a ValuesJam. Before Lisa chooses or helps us to choose the ValuesJam card, PJ, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, thanks, Alan. I'm so excited to be here. This is going to be so much fun. We always have a delightful time when we do a ValuesJam. Oh gosh, where to begin? I mean, I'm trained as an engineer and an applied scientist, which doesn't look like my life today. I spent 30 years in industry, military, defense, aerospace, and spent that time striving to be a successful white male, and I was really good at it. But in 2012, I was diagnosed with a stroke, and it made me see my life completely different. I started my transformation and was lucky enough to study quantum healing under Deepak Chopra for 5 years. So now I have my own company, Positive Knowledge. I'm doing a global campaign around awakening 1 million people to be loving, kind, and respectful. And I focus on the value positive impact. So how do I build a safe space for others to shine? I love to work with high performers that have achieved success, but they're on a quest for that next level of fulfillment. And I like to say that I'm an empowerment coach, and I walk with your soul till you find your path. So I'm really excited about the work I do, and I'm so excited to be here with you guys today.
Well, what a fantastic summary. And I'm thinking that people listening to this might be thinking, oh my God, she's got the best job in the world.
I know, I do. But we all should, right? That's how we should all feel about the work we do.
Yeah, exactly right. So Lisa, we're in your hands then.
Ooh, the power. Lovely, lovely. PJ, every time we meet, I feel so privileged to learn something more and something new about you. So thank you for that. So I'm taking out the cards from the deck here, and mine are all shuffled up. So I'm going to shuffle them a little bit more.
I have a request.
You do?
Can you blow on them a little bit too? Just put your energy in them. Oh, thank you.
Magic tap. I don't have a magic wand. Could I use a magic pen?
There you go. Yes.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to cut the cards now. Would you like me to cut them into 2 or 3?
3.
And would you like me to choose from
the middle?
The middle. The middle. And could you
I
please
already
give
have
me
a
number?
I have a perceived middle.
Middle.
7.
7.
7. Yes.
Do you already know which card it is, PJ?
So I saw this in my dream last night. So 3, middle, 7, and let's go.
Freedom.
Ooh.
Wow. Great card.
Yes.
So, PJ, what does freedom mean? What does it look like, feel like? What does it sound like?
So when the card came up, my body energy went out.
Yeah,
like
me too.
Yes, it was just like, whoa. Oh my goodness, this is going to be so good in so many ways, because the comment that I made around striving for 30 years to be the model of a successful white male was tormenting, right? Freedom is the ability, it feels like you are you. Freedom. You're being exactly why you're here, what you're here for. It's liberating and enlivening and so empowering. Yeah. oh, it tastes like sunshine. It feels like rain. It's your feet in the dirt. It's your feet in the sand. It's lilacs. It's chocolate chip cookies. It's the best brownie ever. It's just free to be the amazing, brilliant soul you were here to be. Freedom is just so much more than just not being oppressed. It's everything. Well, I'll stop right there because I'm getting very hysterical. Sorry about that.
What about you, Lisa?
It's very interesting. I'm looking up because on my wall, I have a picture that I did, and my coach, the wonderful Michelle Walsh, invited me some time ago to do this. And actually, I have a letter F on the wall, and it's got this kind of wibbly wobbly cloud and energy coming out of it. And the F is for freedom, because this is also something that kind of I really have kind of been exploring recently. And for me, freedom is all of those things that PJ said, and it's also about freedom to choose what I do and who I do it with and when I do it. And actually, from a lifetime of being a person who's tried to please other people and make other people happy and focus on other people's happiness, freedom doesn't always come very easily. Mm-hmm. It's something to be worked on, and it's something that's still a work in progress for me. Asking for what I need, saying what I need, and saying it in a loving way, you know. But freedom excites me. It really excites me because it opens up possibility, freedom to explore. The world is so huge, so big, and so wonderful. Nature is so brilliant. And you know, so many books, so many paintings, so many poems, so many places to go, so many people to meet, to connect with, so many people to help. I want to be free to choose. I don't want to feel that I can't make a free decision, a free decision. Yeah.
Yeah, I resonate with what you both said. So the first thing that happened to me was a bit like PJ. I just felt released when I saw the card. And that was a weird feeling, actually, because I didn't realize that I was kind of tense or anything like that. But compared to how I was feeling compared to how I immediately felt when I saw the card, it was just like, whoa. And so a word that comes through for me, which probably isn't reality, actually, but without limits is what I think of when I think of freedom. And something else that came to me was a bird in the sky. That was an image that really just came to me very quickly in terms of being that metaphor for freedom. And the other thing I'd add is a memory from last year, actually. And I was practicing a value every day during the month of October as part of the World Values Day celebrations. And my word for the day was freedom. And so I went on a walk in the woods and I was thinking about freedom. And at that time, I was being invited to work with a school near Phoenix in Arizona. It was an introduction, and it was just going to be a 1-hour session originally, but basically they wanted a values project. And I chose to do it with them. Even though they didn't have any money, it wasn't going to be a paid thing. And so I found myself thinking about this and came to the conclusion that that freedom of choice, like Lisa referred to, is just such a privilege to have, to be able to say, yeah, I'd love to do that project with you and not have to worry about whether it's paid or not and all that stuff. So those are the things that have come through for me initially.
Yeah. Alan, I kind of like pick up on what you said about like a bird flying, actually. And I feel compelled to ask you both, have you ever had the flying dream where you are flying? Yeah.
Mine's the dolphin.
Oh, a dolphin. Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Maybe it's similar, but my kind of experience of I've had these kind of dreams, and you never know quite whether they're a dream or a nightmare or a real experience, but really rising up out of your body and actually being up there. And actually there's something quite scary about it, and about kind of needing to trust that you're going to be okay. And so when you were speaking about that, it just made me think, actually, it's a real metaphor for where I am now. Is it, am I safe to be me? Is it okay to be me and to be free, truly free? And that comes right back to what you said at the beginning, PJ, about kind of, you know, free to kind of be you and not try to be what you think you ought to be and that other people want you to be, you know.
Well, absolutely. For me, freedom is also okay to fail. The freedom to fail, the ability to say, I don't have to be perfect anymore. That's part of being free, truly free, because I grew up a people pleaser. I grew up learning how to be the only woman in the room in aerospace and defense. You know, you have to adapt and be accepted. So I would play the role of being the successful partner, even when my heart wasn't in it. It was, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is how you get promoted. This is how you receive accolades. And there was never an environment of risk, failure, okay. They would talk about the value of the freedom, right? But you just didn't really want to fail in public. Now, as an entrepreneur, I fail on a daily basis. And that's okay, because now I have that freedom to say, failure is part of the challenge of learning and growing. And that's part of the freedom to be you. How do you ever come to that ultimate freedom of yourself if all of these restrictions restrict that freedom? Yeah. Like, you can be yourself, but only look like this. Yeah. You can be yourself, but only be like this. And to fail, the freedom of failure releases all of that stress. It's like, okay, this is going to be a great week. I am going to grow and I'm going to cause positive impact. It's not, I have to be perfect. I can't fail. I have to be. So that freedom is liberating. It's this liberation to say, there is no limit except the one you place on yourself.
Yeah.
You mentioning failure actually there, PJ. I've just had a discussion over the last couple of days about failure, because this guy basically was saying that his business had failed and then he wrote a book about it. So that's the context. But I found myself responding saying, I don't actually find the word failure very useful at all, actually, because, and that's not wishing to kind of brush it under the carpet, but there are two drivers of what people refer to as failure. One is the degree of control that you have over something. And actually that's far less than we think it is. And then the other driver is what else is happening out in the world. And we have very little control over that. So when something doesn't turn out as we had predicted it would, why do we call that a failure? It's just a different outcome.
Yeah, and that's where the freedom comes into. It's that mindset. It's that social conditioning of that conditioning of this is what failure looks like.
We appear to be having a technical issue right
Social
now.
conditioning. Yeah.
PJ, could you say that again? Because the signal just dropped a little bit then.
Oh, okay. I lost the brilliance. So the social conditioning of childhood, right, becomes that narrative of our life. And we are conditioned that this is what failure looks like. This is what, perfect looks like. This is what success looks like. And as children, we look for those models and we try to replicate it. That's where freedom to be yourself comes in, to say, this doesn't look like failure. This looks like growth.
Yeah, absolutely. I always love a good reframe, actually. So yeah, and I think it's really, really helpful, and I think it's really important how we teach young people about this stuff, isn't it? Yes. Really, really important about all of this stuff. And it makes me think that we look at young people and think they are free, but they are so constrained by so many things, actually, aren't they? By educational systems, by peer pressure, social peer pressure, and so on. So
by testing, even adults. I have a very close friend who this new process in the United States, it's new to me, interviewing, where you go through multiple interviews and then you have to run a simulation where you provide them work so they can see your work, all of this before they even hire you. And it was a pretend situation, and she didn't do as well as when I know she is live and in person helping a real person. And so what kind of test are we doing to people to fabricate a situation for them to excel, when in fact they're pretending to excel in a fabricated sense? It's just, so there's no freedom to be yourself. It's like, okay, be yourself, show us your best, and pretend to help this non-entity.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And so many of the practices that we've adopted in management actually come from the military. And that whole kind of job simulation thing, it comes from kind of the military, and kind of the sense that the best predictor of future performance is previous performance. It doesn't take into account your ability to learn or your ability to kind of adapt or how you behave in the moment sometimes, does it? Even when you encounter a brand new situation. Very interesting. So I am going to move us on a little bit. So we've all spoken about it a little bit, but when have you experienced freedom?
For me, freedom is always available in nature for me. Walking in a forest, walking on the beach, being in the mountains, being in a field. There's just so much freedom because of the flow of the air, watching clouds. I mean, nature to me in its essence is pure freedom. It just flows.
Yeah. We're all dreaming of our perfect bit of nature, I think, aren't we? I'm it's the winter time right now, and the weather has been quite rotten, so it's been hard to experience nature quite as much. But yeah, I'm thinking about snowy ski mountains, actually, and the freedom that you can feel when you're at the top. You feel like you're on top of the world sometimes, and the space around you can create freedom, that sense of freedom.
You know, another way, oh, sorry, Alan.
No, you carry on.
Another way I experience freedom is, so let me set the stage. So in business, we predetermine what a meeting's going to be like a lot of times. Charlie's going to be there, Mary's going to be there, he's going to act like this, she's going to act like this, I need to do that, I have, right? And before we even get there, there's this preconceived stress environment. So for me, a freedom that I have experienced is learning the value I bring to the table and saying, in that meeting, what is my role? I'm good at that role, and I will show up and be brilliant at what I do well. And that freedom of worry about, will they like my idea? Won't they like my idea? Will somebody be upset? Will, you know, all of that, having the freedom to come in, and maybe it's age, that we reach a point where we know that we add value. And I don't add value to every situation. And those situations, I am more an observer. But we create this stress and the freedom of knowing that when you show up, like today, Values Jams, we all love this process. The freedom to play and just to enjoy, you know, that's how life should be. That's how freedom is experienced, where, to Lisa's point, you choose to be here, and you choose that joy.
Mm.
I am giddy today. I don't know what's up with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've reminded me of when you were talking about places. We went to Mallorca for a weekend in September, and we decided to get up and drive to a high point on the northeast of the island to watch the sunrise. And when we were up there, a mother goat and her kid stopped by, and they were like 2 meters away from us. And there were a couple of other people there, but that didn't matter. And when we were driving back, we were kind of, is there really COVID going on in this world? And, you know, all of that stuff. And have we got a job? And have we got things that we need to do? Because it all just melted away. And that I associate with freedom. And then I think, to Lisa's point about making choices, this past 12 months, I've chosen to, well, Lisa, we've chosen to create ValuesJam. Then last year, the Global Poetry Showcase, it was just like, yeah, I'm going to do this. Why not? And then the Sawubona Certificate Initiative. And I've never actually been as free before as in the past 12 months, where I've just chosen to do what I want to do or what feels good, and not worry about kind of analyzing it deeply. And that there's a risk to that perhaps, but it's felt great. And
yes.
PJ, similar to you, I guess, with Awaken 1 Million.
Well, absolutely. I think, so all the research out there about the workforce leaving and, you know, the resignations that are happening, I think it really is more about freedom. Not so much that they don't want to work, they want the freedom. They don't want the structure that has been imposed upon people. I mean, I work with folks that travel back and forth to the Pentagon here in Washington. And prior to COVID, it was nothing to block 3 hours on a leader's calendar to get through traffic, to get through the Pentagon, to have a 30-minute meeting, to then get back through the Pentagon and get back through traffic. And now people are like, I'm going to do a Zoom call for 30 minutes with you. I'm not going to do all of that anymore. Before the pandemic, you were seen as nonconformist if you wouldn't do that. Now it's like, well, of course, that's logical. Why would any of us give 3 hours to a 30-minute meeting when we could just all pop on the call and get our work done?
Yeah.
And there is so much freedom, and don't take it as COVID hasn't been devastating, because there have been things that are definitely troublesome that have come from COVID. But when we look at the freedoms that it has given us to think differently and to act differently, I think that's where the reward really comes from, seeing that we can be grateful for, that things have changed.
Mm. And you remember earlier when we were talking about without limits, and I know this isn't talking about without limits, but what you just described is carving back a load of time that we can then spend doing stuff we wanted to do. So there is I think that's a fascinating example of creating more freedom, actually.
It is, but it's also been a space that diligent people have filled with more work, and employers actually, you know, can't argue with the fact that productivity in some areas has significantly gone up, actually. So as with all of these things, it is about balance, isn't it? And getting the balance right and having the freedom to say, actually, my boundary is this, and I'm stopping now for the night. And you're not going to think that I'm shirking because I'm finishing at 5 p.m. For example, actually, because I've been solidly focused on your portfolio work for 8 hours, 9 hours, whatever it is, you know, without any commute, without any water cooler conversations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, you know, one of the gifts that I try to bring to a lot of my calls is, for instance, yesterday we had a chairman's meeting and it was scheduled for 90 minutes. And for whatever reason, a lot of people didn't have a lot of questions. And right around 45 minutes, you start to think, what can I fill this up with? And so for me, what I said was, what if we gave everyone 45 minutes back? They were like, oh. And what happens on your calendar, it still shows red because you're supposed to be in this meeting. And so you're giving them the freedom to say, I was going to be sitting for another 45 minutes in a meeting that quickly ended. Give that back, that freedom back. It's like a gift.
Yeah.
Yeah. It absolutely is. It absolutely is. So thinking about freedom then, how could more freedom improve the world?
So what came to mind was more freedom could create more judgment. That's what came up.
Okay.
So if I'm free to be me and you don't like me, then the judgment might increase. So I think that, I don't know what's coming through here, so bear with me. So more freedom removes structure. And without structure, societies may implode, right? So how do we balance, right? So who's entitled to more freedom and who's not? How do we judge who gets freedom and who doesn't? So it's interesting. You can't make this stuff up when we have these conversations. I had one this month where I told them, I said, this moment will be unique and you will never create it again. I mean, It just sort of comes to you, right?
Yeah.
But I think more freedom used inappropriately could cause chaos.
There's no doubt that you're right, actually, PJ. Imagine if we said to a high school of kids, yeah, just do what you want, have the freedom, and I mean, it would be interesting. I'm sure they've made movies about this kind of thing, haven't they? And what have you, because chaos would ensue, and eventually somebody would decide that there needed to be some ground rules or boundaries or whatever, some parameters around things. So I guess it's interesting, we're free to be what we want to be and be who we want to be, but it doesn't necessarily make us free from judgment unless we allow ourselves to be freed from it. So, we've probably all heard that phrase, it's no business of mine what you think of me, really. That's for you to decide and to feel and everything. But I actually kind of, when I asked that question, what came to me was a kind of an image of people in Afghanistan or Syria who have kind of been oppressed and have not had freedom to live their lives in a safe and joyful and prosperous way. And I think that greater freedom in the world for those types of societies would be a good thing. It comes from democracy, I guess, but yeah, that was where my mind went to when I thought about it.
Well, and that's a perfect segue into, this conversation has been very positive, right? Because that's where we find our core. But let's not forget that the freedom of education, the freedom of human rights is still out there, and more freedom in getting an education so that you can learn who you are, what you're capable of, having the same basic human rights across the globe would actually reduce war and chaos. So that in itself is the freedom of education, the freedom of human rights. Those types of global issues would definitely impact the world for the better, because once you become educated, you can no longer be oppressed. You have the knowledge to rise up and create your freedoms, to create your own reality, right?
When you asked the question, Lisa, the thing that came to my mind immediately was the untapped potential that would be released by giving people more freedom.
Yeah.
So it's this additional discretionary effort that would just flow if people felt freer. And PJ, you're talking about rights. We had a values jam about social justice this month. And my takeaway from that, and it was in response to one of the people on the call shared how they had been doing work with, I think the kids were around about 8 years old. And the guy said, one girl said, "This world needs to be a fairer place." And you just like, oh. And my response to that was, I think we need to expose young children to the injustices in the world, and then trust in their sense of fairness and goodness to be part of the solution to that. And I totally agree with you about the basic rights that I use this metaphor of a couple of aliens in a spaceship looking down on the planet Earth, and one says, look over there at all that wealth, and they don't seem to think that well of it because they're wasting an awful lot, aren't they? And then the other one says, yeah, and that land mass is called the USA, and apparently they grow enough food to feed everybody, but that's not what they use it for. They feed animals, and then they create meat, blah, blah. And then the other one says, oh, and look over there, there's people dying and of no food, no clean water, no medicine. And they come to the conclusion, who are the crazy dudes running this show? And shall we report back that there's no intelligent life form and move on? And then, and I tell that story because it comes back to your point. I find myself really conflicted in a way. I don't understand why everybody on this planet hasn't got the basics, just the basics. I'm not, it's not about sharing income or anything like that, but the basics. Why has everybody not got that?
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think of that every day. There was a post yesterday on, and I won't name names, but a very wealthy entrepreneur donating stock of 5 billion or more. And it was quickly determined that it was a tax write-off, right? So to have that kind of wealth and to just figure out how to take care of yourself, why are we like that? Why can't there be more of this caring of each other and this nurturing? For me, that's what Awaken 1 Million is all about, is raising the consciousness of people to say, if we all are loving, kind, and respectful to each other, everything takes care of itself. When you come from that basic value, life starts to shift. And I think that as a civilization, we've grown old enough that we no longer need to overcome and conquer. We need to come together. And that's when true freedom will begin, as we come together and coalesce on the future of humanity, not who has what.
beautifully put. Beautifully put. If only more of these world leaders' egos could get out of the way, we'd be in great shape, right? And perhaps we should make the Dalai Lama the CEO, the president of the world, and take it from there and see what happens. I think it'd be quite fun. And you spoke, Alan, about asking little kids, giving them the challenges and stuff. I forget where I saw it now, somewhere on social media this week, some videos of 3 little kids being asked, do you think it's right that women should get paid less than men for the same job? And these are real quite tiny ones. They're probably under 6 or something. Well, their responses were fantastic, you can imagine. So if you get a chance, have a Google around and find that. And like the wisdom of children, it's like, huh? That doesn't make any sense. Why do they do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, babies, 2 babies put next to each other. They're not racist or homophobic.
Yeah.
Nature versus nurture,
PJ, have you seen the video that Lisa's talking about the kids and the reward? So basically they get these kids to do a task and then they reward them with, I think, sweets or something. And the boys get twice as many sweets as the girls. So you've got this boy and girl stood there in camera looking down, and they say to them, and do you think that that's right? And they're both like, why has he got more than me? The girl's saying, why has he got more than me? And the boy's saying, why have I got more than her? And it's just brilliant because it demonstrates, how nonsensical it is. Absolutely nonsensical.
Well, there's so many things that we have put into place to keep the masses in line, right? You can go back centuries. that things were created to keep people in line. And that's why I say, I think we've matured enough as a civilization that we can let go of those restrictions. I mean, think of, I'm sure you could come up with a law that is still in place from the 1800s that, requires X to happen. And you're like, what? And we don't even pay attention to what we've created, in a sense that how it's restricting basic human rights.
Mm.
So freedom should be offered to all. And I think that's really the takeaway, is that what we perceive as freedom from a positive perspective is out of reach for so many still. And that's really what should be addressed.
Absolutely.
And connected to that, and
Oh, I got somber all of a sudden, sorry. Oh no,
Apologies for this brief interruption to our broadcast this afternoon.
yeah, feel free to do something in the meantime.
Well, I wish I could juggle or something, but I can't. I mean, we're approaching our final question, but in the meantime, here she comes.
There we go.
Here she
Yay!
comes. Here she comes.
I got somber all of a sudden and then I froze. I do apologize.
Oh, well, yeah. Okay, so we've got Smiley PJ back, and let's close out on the question. What are you encouraged to do differently about freedom as a result of our conversation?
So I think I touched on it a little bit before we started this last question. It's taken me 60 years to reach the freedom level that I feel. And I must realize that not everyone has had that luxury of a journey. And this conversation has brought it home in the fact that not everyone's mirror looks the same way my mirror looks. And I need to pay attention to what they're seeing in their mirror and help with that.
Wonderful.
Can I ask a question about that, PJ? So I understand what you're saying about you understanding what they're seeing in their mirror. I'm wondering if there's something in there as well about exploring and helping them to see what they could see in their mirror.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's part of what is coming up in me, is the human evolution, the 7 levels of consciousness. We're defaulted ego. So those first 3 levels are safety, survival, and relationship. I mean, that's where we all are. Freedom comes when you rise past that and transform. And it doesn't mean that wealth comes. It's a freedom of, even those that are oppressed can feel freedom because they personally have evolved. Okay. So that's what I'm saying, is the mirror that they see, that they don't have freedom. How do we engage in that conversation to say, there is freedom inside? You have the potential to have freedom no matter your situation, right? Because if we were to take on human rights and all of that at a global level, braver people than us have taken that on, right? But if we can go to the soul of each individual and say, you have the power to feel freedom where you are. When you look in that mirror, what do you see? A victim or someone who is free?
Yeah.
I think it's beautifully put, and it just inspires me to do much more than I'm doing right now to help act as the guide, the mentor, the coach, the role model, maybe, for people who are not feeling that freedom.
Mhm.
I started off thinking particularly about children. I've heard some really horrible, sad, disturbing things about young children and their mental health this week. And I just so want to free them from the stories the limiting stories they tell themselves, from that peer pressure, and to set them free and let them know that actually it gets so much better. It gets so much easier if only you knew you could trust that, and you knew how. It would be great. I know that sometimes we have to experience it and live it to truly appreciate it, freedom. We have to not have experienced freedom in order to truly experience it, I should say. But yeah, that's what I feel like I want to do more of.
Well, to add to your comment, I think it's the awareness. How do we expand our awareness to recognize that we are not free, and then are willing to accept what we need to travel through to get to that freedom?
Yeah.
And I've got two takeaways. One is related to what you've just said, PJ, because I think that no matter how our freedom might be restricted, the one freedom that we definitely all do have is choice. No matter how difficult those choices might be, I'm not trying to make it sound as though it's easy, but we do have the freedom to make a choice. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is a bit selfish, actually, but this conversation has really just reinforced something that came to me as a result of the Values Jam about social justice, because that example of the feedback from the kids encouraged me to think about the Global Values Alliance. So I created that a few years ago, and it's a bunch of people around the world wanting to create greater authenticity around the world, but we haven't been particularly active. And so the idea came to me at that session that, and I'm going to do this has really just confirmed that I'm going to recruit children into the roles that are currently held by a bunch of grown-ups. So the Global Values Alliance, I would like to be a young people thing. And because I can choose, that's what I do.
Fantastic, Alan. That
And
sounds absolutely
into,
amazing.
Yes, that plays into an amazing legacy, right? That's something that you and I talked about a long time ago when we first met, which was just last year. But it is, how do you, the freedom to change the model from adults doing something to allowing children to do it, which is really that legacy. That's beautiful.
So we've come to the end of this Values Jam with PJ about freedom. So thank you, PJ, for making it such a, as always, fascinating conversation. And I've really enjoyed the dynamic of us both being on this Values Jam session, because the first one with Richard Barrett was just the two of us. And so it'll be interesting to see as we go forward how many different formats actually there are going to be for these sessions, because they always throw up something just brilliant and joyful. So thank you very much again, PJ.
Thank you. And I always tell everyone, ask about Values Jams. They are unique in the moment. You cannot tell what will happen, and it will never happen the same way again.
Dead right. What a great note to end on. Thanks very much.
Thank you,
All right.
PJ.
Take care. Bye.